Welcome to What Are You Even Talking About? The podcast where we talk a little bit about everything. I am your host, the Nomothete. Welcome to the show. Talking about the podcast. Welcome to What Are You Even Talking About? The podcast where we talk a little bit about everything. Today's guest, I'm excited to be interviewing because I got her book. You can see that. And her name is Ingrid Turner. Ingrid is a spiritual teacher, minister, poet, and a channel for divine spirit. In 2017, Ingrid founded the Bhava Spiritual Mission, an international non-for-profit organization that teaches spiritually committed individuals how to connect with their own spiritual gifts and take them out into the world. She is also the architect of the Somatic Renewal Healing Method, a program that guides seekers to deeply understand their unique energetic signature, gain practical skills in living by their natural energy flow, and learn tools to permanently release all that is not authentic experience. Ingrid's gifts are so impactful because she channels the absolute and unconditional love of Holy Spirit and then coaches people to implement the divine grace into their lives through radical, loving, and persistent honesty. Ingrid has a knack for making the esoteric accessible, making her one of the best teachers of intuition development. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Right. We like to start the show with a question from the last guest. So they get to pick one question they get to ask, whatever it is, to the guest without knowing who the next guest is.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
I got that from another podcast called Diary of a CEO.
Yeah.
And I just found it like amazing. So I was like, I have to use that.
Yeah, I got to adopt that. That's amazing. Okay.
Yeah. So the question was, what is the one thing you would do to fix the world?
Heal the individual. The new earth, the expanded consciousness, the world is healed, the whole collective is healed on the backs of the individual. It's all about disintegrating the conditioning and the trauma that the individuals are carrying that is making them act in weird ways. Because our conditioning and our trauma creates patterns in our lives, self-sabotage, we get triggery, we're not operating in our most authentic, happy, profound selves when we're carrying around that nonsense. And I don't think you can change the world. I think you can help heal the individual. And that is what ripples out and changes the world.
So that's a great answer. Because, I mean, we definitely, as a people, are hurting. And it takes a lot, to deal with every day, and it shouldn't, because a lot of things that are far more simple are the easiest ways to help us. Like when we think about the simplicity of healing, it's the simple things that, we should care most about. And we don't most days. I know I don't. I used to, I had a very traumatic past, and it was hard growing up. And it got even harder as an adult. And being a Black man put more, stigma on top of that. And it was just a hard experience. And then about 4 years ago, I had a spiritual awakening. Like everything started going wrong in my life. Like people were just attacking me.
Oh my God.
I didn't know why. I felt like I was going through a psychosis because I'm diagnosed schizoaffective. And didn't realize all the stuff that was being put into play for me to get better.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it just, in the last 4 years, I just went through that. And I've started my podcast trying to talk about my experience. And
that's fantastic.
Just, teaching people that they can get through it too.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's a hard lesson for most people to learn, that you can make it. And that's what we're trying to do here. So tell us about your journey and how you made it to where you are today.
Okay, where to start? So I had my spiritual awakening about 10 years ago. And it came on the end of a year of after I finally got sober. I was tangling with alcoholism and really struggling from my own trauma and issues and living out an inauthentic experience, stressed to the max. That's something that I think we're certainly experiencing hugely in the United States is everybody's really, really stressed out. And it's even more true today than it was 10 years ago. But even 10 years ago, I think people were maxed out and stressed out. And I was certainly one of them. And I just hit a breaking point. And I got sober. I went to a 12-step program and that was really helpful for the first year. But then after the first year, it kind of wasn't enough. I felt this rumbling like, there's something more. I've kind of cleared out and I kind of done all I can do here. So I went to a shamanic healing event, and at that event, I had a blasting open to spirit. It was like tectonic plates shifted inside me, and I was completely full of spirit and fully open to all of my spiritual gifts. And as you read in my bio, like I'm a channel for divine spirit, I'm a psychic, I'm a medium, I got all of that. And those I've always been that, but they were stuffed. They were latent. I had like shoved them down at the altar of trying to fit into this box that I was never going to fit in. I was never going to be happy working a corporate 9 to 5. And so I blasted open, and that changed my life so fundamentally and so completely. I was really lucky at that time, I think, not to end up medicated, because I had a cracking open where I was not functional. I wasn't grounded. I was way, way out there. And it took me about 2 years to really ground in, and come back to earth. You look at me now, like you can see I'm a really grounded person, but the truth is I work at it because it's easy for me to slip up to, kind of go out here and go out of my body. So when that happened though, it became so clear to me that I couldn't have my life split up into categories. I couldn't have work over here and spirituality over here and my relationships over here. Everything had to come together under God, under that divine source energy, because it was absolutely what I was here for. So when I made that decision, that commitment, I began to work on building a life and a lifestyle that is all wrapped up in spirit and creativity. I write poetry, which for me is often a channeling experience as well. And that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years. And then in 2017, I got a visit from my spirit guide, right? And his name is Mons, and he will show up occasionally. And when he does, it's like, I'm paying attention. What do you got for me? And he told me, oh, you need to start a church. I said, absolutely not going to happen. I'm not doing that. We don't do churches. Nope. And it's like, okay. And then a few days later, I got a visitation again. And this time he came with more details. He said, you need to start a church because you're going to teach people how to do what you do and you need to protect them. And I went, logical. Okay. So I went Googling, about churches and ordinations and what all that meant. And really what I found out was, ordained ministers have a lot of protections that like a therapist would have with their license. And so I was like, oh, that's what he meant. The structure to train people how to open up to their psychic gifts and their spiritual gifts and help them like build their own business, livelihood, lifestyle, whatever that is that they want to do with it, with the protection of an ordination, but also taking them through a really a structured training program, because this is the bleeding edge spirituality. There's no rules out here, and that's okay. Well, but what I'm really good at, because of the intensity of my awakening and how untethered I became at my journey back to grounding in so that I could do this work. I wasn't functional for 2 years until I got my grounding. Then I was like, oh, okay, I'm back in the world, like I can do this now. I'm able to guide people through that spiritual awakening without them losing that connection, without them spinning out. So we stay really grounded, and then they move out in that capacity. So that's what I've been focusing heavily on since 2017. And then the other side of what I do is my poetry and my writing. So I'm working on a new poetry collection, which hopefully will be out by Valentine's Day, because it's love poems. Awesome. It seems to make the most sense. Those are the two prongs of Ingrid. That's what I do.
That is lovely. I wish I could have had a spiritual teacher when I was going through my psychosis / spiritual awakening, because it hit me like a ton of bricks.
I bet.
Like, it came out of nowhere. My family just thought I was using drugs, and I wasn't medicated. So they thought that was the problem. When I kept trying to explain to them, I wasn't. Like, I wasn't doing anything. I was hurting. And it was a culmination of pain that stemmed back all the way to childhood. And like a lot of things just hit me at once. And I realized I wasn't okay with how things were.
Mm-hmm.
And it manifested, and I was hearing voices, and it was so terrifying. And like, I was sitting out, we used to have a truck in our yard, and I would sit out there and draw every day, like all day. And because that's what Spirit told me to do. It was like, you want to learn how to draw? Go get you some paper, go get you some pencils, get the tools you need to do this. And so I went to the store and bought a bunch of tools, like all sorts of things that artists would use that I'd never used before. And I started drawing. So I was sitting out in the truck, and one time I fell asleep. It was the only time I'd ever fallen asleep out there. And I woke up, and it was like I took in a deep breath, and it was like I was talking to God. Like God all of a sudden started to speak to me. And I ran inside my house. I was the only one living there at the time, because systematically everyone moved out of the house slowly while I was going through this transition. And so it was like he removed everyone from the house for me to go through this, but I had to do it on my own.
Yeah.
And I ran in the house. It felt like I started speaking like many different languages, all praising God. And I ran outside on my porch and yelled that everyone should bow down to the Most High. And like, I literally felt like I was going crazy. And I kept telling myself, like, there's no one at the house. No one's speaking to you. And like, I fought it for so long, and the voices just got louder. And then I went through every situation that was a problem for me in my life at that time, and had conversations with the versions of people that I knew. And I would have arguments, and then like a day later, that person would show up and we'd have that argument in real life. And like throughout the argument, I'd be like, I already had this conversation with you. And they'd be like, what are you talking about? We haven't talked about this at all. And I'm like, but I did though. And that's why I had the backbone to say what I needed to say to them, because I'd had this discussion with voices. So I kept going through it, and I was like, I want to help people. I want to learn how to help people get through stuff like this, because it happens to many people. And in other cultures, they have shamans there to find those people and get them through it.
Yeah.
And, teach them that they're shamans. So it's like, that's not something we teach here in America.
No.
It's looked down upon. It's looked like you have problems like that can't be fixed. You're always going to be like that. And people treat you like you don't know what you're talking about. So it's like you're trying to explain to them what you're going through, and they're like, no, you're just going crazy. Or no, you just need medication. Like, that's the one I hear the most. Sure. And they, and they all use that to hold it over your head. Like, anytime you try to voice your opinion or have a backbone about something or make a boundary for yourself, they'll be like, did you take your medicine? And it's like, yes, I took meds. And I still that's not, yeah, and I still have something to say. And a lot of people, just don't understand what people are going through when they're going through that. And if we had a better system in place, we would take these people in and teach them how to deal with it, and teach them how to get through it, and help others like us go through them, because they need the help. Because like I said, I wish I would have had somebody, because it was so terrifying to me. Yeah. Like, I almost killed myself because it was too much almost. Like one day the sky, like everything turned purple to me. And I was just looking at everything, and it was just so beautiful. And I was looking at the sky, like my girlfriend at the time showed up, and I hadn't talked to her in years at that point. She just so happened to get in touch with me and came by to see me, and I explained like the universe to her. And I explained what I was seeing and everything. And even she was like, you're just kind of out there now. And I'm like, it's not that. I was like, I'm seeing the beauty in this world. and I'm seeing the power
Yeah.
that goes along with the universe. And I couldn't explain it. And that's another problem. We have problems explaining these situations to people, because how do you explain that you're talking to God? And like it's hard for people to take in. And
Absolutely.
it really needs to be a way for us to help others with these gifts, because it is a gift. It's something that we go through that makes us stronger in order to help ourselves and then other people as well. And that's just what I think about it. I'm sorry, I went off on a little tangent.
No, that's okay. I have some thoughts about that.
Okay.
You know, I've considered that and contemplated sort of the where does mental illness and spiritual awakening, like what is the connection there? Where does it overlap? Is there a delineation? You know, I've thought about this a lot, and I agree that, you know, you're experiencing a very intense, like almost like a ripping open is the way that I can see it visually in my head. And, you know, it's true, you know, in other cultures and other times, we've had shamans and healers and guides to grab hold of these people who were exhibiting these signs of awakening and drag them through it, you know, to help them get to the other side and protect them from the negative energies that I think are attracted to, as well as the higher energies that are attracted to that, like sort of vortex of energy that you experienced and emitted, right? From what you're describing, it's like you went up and down between like these high God frequencies and these real low, terrifying frequencies, right?
Yes,
So,
very much so.
you know, and it's heartbreaking that we live in a country and a culture and a time where the only help is, oh my God, medicate them, right? And yet,
or lock them away.
Or lock them away. And yet, we've also, like, we don't have the tool. Like, if we don't do something, there are people who can really hurt themselves. You know, there's also like a, you know, if they're don't have any cognizance of what's going on. You have some spiritual cognizance, right? So you're like, okay, but many people don't, I would imagine. Now, I have not gone through this experience, so I am speaking purely conjecture and my observation. I welcome you to like correct me or tell me what you think, or give me an expanded viewpoint here, because it is something that I think about too. And I think that my feeling is that people like you who are born into this body with this incredible ripping open experience, you know, you're not choosing the easiest lifetime, because you're not born into a culture where a shaman is going to grab hold of you and say, come on, kid, like, let's get you through this.
Exactly.
Let's get you on path. You have, it's a much harder path. And what you're doing with this is and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I heard you say that you're on medication. So you're kind of going that route, right? So if you're going that route, like that is appropriate for the culture and the time that we're in. You have to kind of use both pillars. You're grabbing both pillars, which is the shamanic route, the spiritual route. I want to help people. I want to be this for people. And at the same time, knowing that we don't have a society that can really support you in your full, ripped open experience, and nobody is here to help pull you through that. And so you have to limp along with the tools that are available in this society, and at the same time move yourself into, you know, do the healing slowly but surely and take yourself through it with you know, help that comes along. But you don't have anybody who like really knows what they're doing, you know, to help bring you through that.
It's a mismatch of
it is, yeah,
of using the tools that are present for me at the time,
yeah,
and just to get through it, like you know what will stable you enough to handle the situation,
right,
but also using religion and spirituality to keep you focused on God
and connected, and also somewhat connected to that knowing, that channel. I mean, you're experiencing a massively huge channel that you're not able to control, which is very different than the channel that I experience, which is, you know, I don't have that experience this lifetime, and you do. But what are you doing? This is incredible. Like, what I'm hearing is you are grabbing hold of the tools that what you need to use that's available in our culture, in our society, in order to be able to, okay, I can manage this world, right? Like, but at the same time, you're making this commitment, you're showing up and you're speaking, and you are being the version of a shaman that for other people out there who are experiencing what you're experiencing, and guiding them through in as grounded a way as you can. And that's phenomenal. Mark. That's phenomenal. It's a journey, and it's
definitely
like your soul did not choose an easy path. And I'm I'm so profoundly kind of have this feeling of gratitude and humility to see that you're doing this incredible balancing act and then turning around and giving back, because I cannot reach people, and lots of people, spiritual teachers, we're not going to be able to reach people who are having your experience, which is way more intense than most of us will have. And in a spiritual experience, mine was intense. Yours is way more intense, but you can, because you can show up and you can speak the language, you can speak the experience, and you can help people find that balance who are stuck in this culture and we don't have access to what is really needed. And you find that balance and help people find the balance of sorting it out, and like functioning in this society, which is broken, right? And I'm not saying it, it's broken, and staying connected to that source, to God, and to what you know and experienced. How does that feel?
Feels pretty good. It's funny because as a child, I was really into odd things. Like, I didn't have the childhood that most kids did. I was raised as an only child for the most part until I got older. I have siblings. It was just that in the situations that we were in, sometimes I wasn't with them. And then I was so much older than them that there was just this distance between us. Mm-hmm. And so I did a lot of study in mythology and meditation and Buddhist trainings.
Makes sense.
And like, these are all the things I had as a kid, that no one taught me. It was like, I always just wanted to be a part of those lives. And I learned as much as I could about each part of it. Like, I spent a big amount of time studying these things. And then when I went to college for the first time, my major was theater, but I double majored and was also religion and apocalyptic eschatology. And that's the study of prophetic books and like from different religions. And I didn't finish, but I studied a lot and I wrote papers on it a lot. And it seemed like all of that prepared me for what I was going to go through. Because like, I literally would start meditating if I had a problem, or I'd go through deep breathing exercises if I had a situation. I would walk in nature. Like, I did all these things, and people always looked at me really odd, and like growing up and stuff, they were like, "He's the odd one."
Yeah.
And I'd be like, "Thanks." But it was very much. It helped me get through the worst part of my life, and it was so strange when I realized I was through it. And to also know that it wasn't over, because that's life. Like, there's always the next thing. And you always have to, relearn things, and you go back through lessons sometimes and have to remind yourself that, yes, it's happening again, but that doesn't mean my life is off track or that I'm not doing everything I can.
Yeah.
And once I got to that point, I also knew I wasn't going to take any shit too.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to have boundaries now, and I'm not going to let people treat me a certain way, but that doesn't mean they won't try to treat me that way. Sure. And that's something on them and not me. And it took a lot, but now I'm far more focused and still spiritually minded. And it's amazing. Like, so I'll have voices that come to me and explain to me like why we do things. Like, one of the biggest things I did was I visualized a clock on the ground, and I would walk clockwise, and that meant I was going forward in time. And then when I walked backwards, it would be I was walking backwards through time. And I spent days walking backwards, and it was like going through my life to all the situations that plagued me, or situations I went through as a kid that I shouldn't have, or, just all the terrible trauma that was a part of my life. And I sat with it, and I let myself know that it was okay. And I was like, it happened, but you're past that point. Everything that's ever come against me, I've gotten through. So why isn't that the case now? And it made me a stronger person for it. And when I finally felt that I could move forward, that's when I would start walking clockwise again. And it helped build a sense of knowing that I could validate myself in the things I know that happened to me that people told me never happened. And, you know, getting over what people thought so much as when I would tell them something, if they believed me or not. And because that was a big part of it for me, was trying to explain it to someone who would understand, and being around a bunch of people who just didn't. And it made it hard, but I got through it once again. And I proved to myself and to those people that what they thought of me was wrong. And it took a lot. Like, I would have people literally physically fighting me on some days. And I would be like, I'm not doing what you think I'm doing. I'm spending all my time learning. Like, I spent that 4 or 5 years I had because I didn't have a job and I was on disability, or I am on disability. And I took the time where I would just be sitting there all day doing nothing. And I learned stuff. I started journaling. I started working on myself, and I didn't let anyone stop me from that. And this is all while dealing with seeing gods and God and, you know, angels, and dealing with all of that on top of that, and not having a support system to support me there made it very hard. It made it so hard to deal with. And it almost crushed me. And I know there's people out there that don't have support systems in situations like this. And sometimes the end is not good for them. Like, it doesn't end well because it's so much to take in that they think there's no way to get through it. So they do the thing that they know will help, and that's end their lives and stuff. And it's just a shame that they have to go through it without someone. So I think that's my biggest thing, is I want to be the shaman for people who don't have shamans.
I can really feel that in you, just the welling of emotion and energy and passion that you have. It's like a bubble that's ready to burst, but like in a good way.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I spend a lot of time contemplating life. I spend a lot of time drawing because I always wanted to draw, and whatever comes out in my drawings just come out my drawing. And for the longest time, that was another part of my spiritual awakening. I was doing a lot of drawing where it would just be random stuff and I didn't remember drawing. And like, it was very channeled, and I would go into like a trance and draw and wouldn't know what I was drawing. And you could barely make out the pictures because it was literally scribbled lines all over the paper, almost to a point where it would be black. Like, I would just keep drawing over top of things. And one day during my spiritual awakening, I asked myself, or I asked God, why am I drawing? He was like, because when you're finished, you'll know everything. He was like, when you finally complete the picture, you'll see the whole picture. And so I was like, I'm going to finish this picture. And I thought he meant that picture. All right. I'd say he, but that's just for.
Right. Yeah.
And I thought he meant that picture, and that's not what he meant. He meant life in general. Once I could back up and finish my picture, because I had a problem with finishing things, that I would see the bigger picture. And when I finally came out of my dark night of the soul, if you will, I saw the bigger picture. And I was like, got to help people. Like, we need to help people. Like, they're all going to lose their angel wings. Like, they got to help people. And it was just intense. It was very intense what I dealt with. And I can look back on it now and laugh and smile about it. But I knew how crazy I looked.
Right.
And I couldn't explain it to people. Like,
you
I was
weren't
like,
grounded, right?
Yeah, not at all. Not at all. And it was terrifying.
Yeah, that's going to be the biggest thing for you, is to stay grounded as you're going through your own process and understanding yourself, and in order to help other people. You know, unless you're grounded, you can be have all the downloads, everything, and you can't bring it to anybody in a practical way that provides, practical solutions for people. And I feel would you agree that that's what you're balancing now, is how to stay grounded and open?
Yes. Yes, it's very much so.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to show people that spirituality doesn't have to mean religion.
Oh, no.
And because
in fact,
so many
I don't
people,
think the two are the same at all.
I don't either. And
if I may, on that, I have are you familiar with Paramahansa Yogananda?
No.
Paramahansa Yogananda was a Hindu sadhu who came over from India to the United States in the 1920s. He's the one that brought yoga and meditation to the West, right? And one of the things he said that that really struck me, he said, spirituality is crown chakra, right? Connecting to source. Religion is root chakra, safety, security. The two can coexist, can blend together, can be symbiotic, but they're completely separate energies. And when we start to worship the religion, right, the root chakra stuff, we've lost our spirituality. We are mistaking it for our spirituality.
Yeah, that's I felt more free during my spiritual awakening than I ever had in my life. And that's a life full of religion. I was raised Southern Holiness Pentecostal. So that was very much women don't wear pants, and it was very close to cultish. And it got intense sometimes. And you weren't able to have your own thoughts on things. Sure. If you thought outside of the box, you were condemned. Everything I did in life was going to send me to hell. And I was like, I don't understand when I'm in church 7 days a week. It just was, we went to church a lot. And, it helped build a foundation for my spirituality. Sure. But I couldn't take that as the full amount of spirituality because it was run by man, and man had all these rules that God doesn't have.
Right.
When they put you in a box and tell you can only do certain things and you can only be certain things and only certain things can happen, it keeps your mind at a place of this is all that there is. And once you realize that that's not true, then you can elevate. And you can see the bigger picture. And I feel like, a lot of people don't see the bigger picture. I know I put up a post on Instagram, and it was a lady talking about how, some people call it quantum physics, some people call it manifestation, other people call it prayer, but no one's saying that it doesn't exist. This force doesn't exist. And I got so much backlash from people saying this is not a part of quantum physics. And I was like, do you understand quantum physics? Because it is. And, I've put a lot of study into science and religion and spirituality and philosophy, that what she's saying is that there's a force out there that when we want something, it's going to put in place things where we can get it. But that comes from the human mind. We want something, we put forth the effort to get it. And I think that's another thing about manifestation that people don't get. They think they can just say something and it happens.
Right.
And it's no, you have to put forth the effort to make these things happen. You have to put yourself in places where these things are more likely to happen. And you have to put in the work for that. And a lot of people just don't want to do that. I have a statement I made, and it says effort equals action plus choice over time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's saying that to put forth the effort into the action over time, you're more likely to get it because you made the choices that led you into that. And that's where the manifestation comes from. You yourself manifested this by putting forth the work. And, it's a good part of shadow work. And, these are things that we don't get to do often in America because they're not seen as needed when they're so very needed. They're so very needed. And we don't have the people to help people with it. So thank you for what you do. And we just need more people out there doing these things. I
And they're
got off
popping
topic.
up all over the place.
Yeah.
Like there's lots of people in communities and people who are called to their version of this kind of work. And there's all of us are needed and all of us are saying the same thing. Nobody's an original, but we're all getting the same information from source and we're bringing it through and we're all learning the same lessons, but there's so many people needed because there's billions of people on the planet and not everybody's going to connect with an Ingrid and not everybody's going to connect with a Mark. And you have to find resonance and you have to find relatability, right? You've been where I am. I can hear this from you. Whereas that person over there is like, oh, she doesn't know what the hell I've been through. Like, correct. I don't. So yes, go over there where you're able to hear it. There's no competition. The people are waking up to spirit at a clip right now. And it's pretty exciting. It's a very exciting time to be alive because things are changing so fundamentally. I mean, I would bet in, another 15, 20 years, mental health treatment is going to be totally revolutionized in this country. And people who have had your experience are going to have a much easier time of it because we're starting to see that the old way of doing things is not as effective as some of the newer methodologies and technologies. And I think that people who are on the receiving end of the receiving end of the medical industry and the mental health aspect as well are like you are going to be the ones speaking up and sharing and helping to shift that. I think that's really important.
I think it's the fact that the people that are going through this have no other sources of what has happened or is what's happening to them.
Yeah.
And it's hard to explain to your family that God is talking to you or universe is talking to you and they can't hear it or they don't see it. And, it's hard for them to support that because they think you're going crazy.
Absolutely.
And it just makes it so hard to deal with.
You don't have spiritual support systems in order to help people go through that intense of an experience. And so you have to some degree, in order to kind of, step up and do your work to some degree, you have to lean on the structures that are in place as imperfect as they are.
Yeah. Or find the right books and find the right people. Because I know there was a time during my spiritual awakening, I was just having a bad day. Like I had just gotten into a fight with somebody physically and got into an emotional fight with somebody else. And I was sitting alone. And that was probably the worst time to be alone because of how my mind was thinking. And I was just sitting there and I was like, give me a sign that I am doing the right thing. And give me a sign. And I was like, I need a straight up Old Testament style.
Yeah, right. This is
give
really
me a
obvious.
sign. I was like, I need this to be as obvious as possible. I need this to be something I recognize. And so all of a sudden I was scrolling through YouTube actually, and this video was by Deepak Chopra, and it said someone just told me to click on it.
Yeah.
So I click on it and it's a meditation. It was only for a minute. And it literally said, start with your name and then go backwards through the letters. And so I did that. And then it said, what is left is I am. And in big letters, I am popped up on the screen. And I burst out into tears because growing up in religion, I am means God. And it hit me so hard that I just cried for hours.
Wow.
And I said, okay, that's all. That was what I needed. And from there on, I started working toward getting my psychology degree. And I couldn't get into school. Like every school I tried wouldn't accept me. And I just kept trying. And then I was going to go into business instead because I could get the business school to take me, but no other school. And as soon as I was about to start with the business school, an ad popped up and it said, give for degrees in psychology from this school. And I'm going to that school now.
Wow.
And
that's
so
amazing.
It was it was literally like, God was like, here. And I was like, oh, And
okay.
I'm ready for this. But I also started a life coaching company, and I did all the certifications I need. I have 19 certifications so far. And
Whoa.
I spent most of my time just learning.
Yeah.
And I keep learning every day. And it's just been a very good feeling to know stuff that I wrote down 3 years ago has come to pass now. And I can see it, visually, because I can see where I asked for this,
Yeah.
and I got it. And
Isn't that
like, even
amazing
with
when you go through, when you take a minute and go through your life and you're like, check, check, check. Oh, I did manifest everything
yeah,
that I wanted. Amazing.
people don't think it's possible, and they
No, they
think people
don't.
are lying when they say that you can manifest these things and get these things.
Yeah.
Like, I would have never thought that a few years ago. Like, much time as I've taken with spirituality, I would have never thought that I could literally speak stuff into existence.
Yeah.
And that's not been the case. I've been doing it ever since. And it's just helped me so much. And it's been a wild ride.
Yeah.
And I keep meeting new people who I'm more in tune with. Like, every time I do an interview, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so in tune with this person.
That's so
And
great.
like, people are just like, that is amazing. And you just make these appointments with people. I was like, yeah, they just show up. I was like, because I was so worried earlier this month. I was like, I don't have anybody as guests. I'm gonna have to take like a whole month off because I don't have any guests. And then it was like popped up. It was like 5 guests. I was like, oh snap.
Yes.
That's the whole month. Awesome.
That's done.
And like, yeah, like, and it's validating to the experience I'm having.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing. Let me get to some of these questions that I have. So this question comes from a listener and my daughter's mother. She asks, if you could create your perfect or dream work, what would it look like?
My dream work? I'm
Yes.
living it.
See, and that's what I figured you would say.
I mean, my whole, like I said earlier, I made this commitment where everything had to come together, and I have this, life under God. The only thing I might shift a little bit is I'd like to put a little more focus on writing and poetry, because that is such a passion of mine. I'd love to create more of an impact with that. I have hundreds and hundreds of writings that I'm just slowly kind of putting into collections. It would be a dream of mine to really make a bigger impact and kind of bring poetry back, in a relatable way, not in this stupid flowery blah blah, like so many people
everything has to rhyme.
Everything, and it's like mine almost nothing rhymes. It's like it's about bringing the human experience, the explainable, into just a few precise words. That's like, there it is. That's what I'd like to do. That's what I would, the part of my life and work that I would like to increase.
See, that it's funny you say that, because your book not rhyming made it feel more real.
Oh, that's good feedback. Awesome. Good.
Yeah, it made it feel far more real, and like I could feel what you were feeling, because it didn't have to be in rhyming couplets or anything like people think,
no boxes.
Traditional poetry is. Yeah. And it just made it more real. And like I've folded down corners of every poem that just called out to me.
Amazing.
Ended up with,
oh my God.
with there's a lot of folded pieces of paper in there.
That's awesome. I love that.
But like some of them I was really drawn to. And I know on the front of the book it says, poetry for women, but it still,
or people who love them.
Yeah, it spoke out to me a lot. It really I felt like I could understand you a lot more because of, what you wrote. And it made me far more excited about this interview, because I was cool. Like, okay, I can see where we're going to get along. Yeah. I can see where we've had the same type of situations, and it just made it that much easier to do the interview.
I will say this, not all of my poetry is autobiographical. Because I'm a channel, sometimes it's a spirit that comes through. Sometimes it's a hit I get from somebody else, a whole ass experience that I'm able to channel through and bring through in poetry. So, Yeah, so not everything is mine, and which can very much confuse people. And a lot of times what I bring through is like I can bring through some really dark energy, not energy, but like dark emotions, very intense experiences. It's pretty funny. I've been writing poetry since I was 7 years old. Actually, my first poem was a mediumship experience. That was the first poem that I wrote. I was like walking across the living room and it was tiny, and I stopped midway because there was this man in my head and he dictated this poem to me, and I wrote this poem from the perspective of a grown man. So it's always been like that. But not too long ago, my mother said, "Yeah, I used to worry about you with the things you would write." And then I finally realized that it was fine. You're fine. It was just art coming through, but it was very intense, very intense poetry. Yeah.
I've had a situation like that where I was dead asleep and something woke me. I could hear my name being screamed, and I woke up and I
Oh,
grabbed
yeah.
pen and pencil and paper and just started writing.
Yeah.
And when I was done writing, I just went back to sleep like nothing happened.
Wow.
And yeah, so the next morning there was a piece of paper sitting next to me, and it was covered, front back page, and I had no recollection of writing it at
Whoa.
all. Yeah,
Wow. That's
and
intense.
it was, but it was a very interesting poem because I write as well. I do
Yeah.
also play a lot of instruments. I'm
Really? Yeah.
very artistic, and I play a bunch of instruments. It's whatever I can put my hands on. And
Wow.
yeah, and the poem started, I'm an original thinker. That is what people will say. A person who will bring people to oblivion one day. A
Whoa.
person of charm with a talent for speech, that no goal shall be altered or out of my reach. And I was like, oh.
Oh.
um,
And do you think that was you channeling a spirit that came through and told you that, or do you feel it was
it had
you?
to have been.
Yeah.
I didn't, at the time, I didn't know if it was me or spirit.
Yeah.
And, but I also felt like it was both. Because
Well,
like when
that,
people
yeah.
explain, Jesus and God, they have a hard time understanding that Jesus could be both Jesus and God.
Yeah.
And I took it as part of both, but I felt like he was showing me things that were coming. And that's how I took it more as prophecy than
Mm,
if it was me or spirit, if
right.
that makes any sense.
Yeah. Sort of
Um,
showing you where you're headed.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I felt like the oblivion one day line was meaning when I let go of everything and I went through my dark night of the soul, now looking
Hmm.
back on it. Because throughout the years, I've also wrote poems that started with the same type of feeling to it as that poem.
Yeah.
But it's always different. It's never like the first.
Yeah.
So it had to have been spirit because I've tried to copy that mentality for that poem and it's never come off the same way since.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like, it was just one of the lines stuck with me throughout the years, and it was a pleasure of insanity and climaxing in pain.
Hmm.
And it, I felt that happened in my life because it was so traumatic. And a lot of times were good as well, but the
Yeah.
trauma stuck with me far more than the good times in my life. And it was, once again, it was just hard to deal with because there was no one there to understand.
Yeah.
And it made it really hard. But I got through it and I'm far better now.
Yeah.
And it's just a wonderful experience to know I made it through.
Hmm.
And other people can do that too. And that's the other
Yes.
thing I learned in that experience was I am not the only person here. There
Mm.
are billions of people here. And we all have the same choices if we allow ourselves to.
Right.
And it's, I had a shirt made, merch endorsement real quick, that says anything is possible
Hmm.
until you make a choice.
Hmm.
It's not
Wow.
until we make a choice that stuff starts closing down. Things we could do start shutting off because we made a choice. Once we make that choice, parts of the multiverse closes off to us because we made that certain choice. So it opens up these choices, but it closes off these choices. So
right. That's brilliant.
It shows how you can follow your progress, or you can see the story of how you got to somewhere because of the choices that you made, and see where it blocked you off of, like, maybe this is not going to happen now because you chose to do this. So you have the plan without knowing the plan.
Right.
But every choice we make is our choice to make. And no one pushes you to that.
I love that. But that's why that makes me think, that's why it's so important when you don't know what choice to make, don't let it breathe, because it'll come clear, like the choices you want to make. Because we want to make choices that we want, not choices that we don't want. And so often when we rush ourselves to make a choice, we're making a choice based on things that don't matter instead of choices based on our joy and our healing and our journey.
Yeah. And our body will reactively make a choice.
Yes, it will.
We're not careful, because there's a study where they have been able to scan the brain and see your choice about 3 minutes or something like that before you make it, that your subconscious is already choosing for you. And, because we run on autopilot. And that's my theory on that, is the fact that they can do that is because we run on autopilot so much that our body is always ready to do something, because we don't get the time to relax. We don't get the time to breathe. Like, we're just running off of survival most of the time. And survival is going to do usually some of the dumbest things because it's trying to survive instead of flourishing and being creative, or getting us out of a situation that we might not get ourselves into if we thought about it. It's just automatic because the body wants to survive.
Interesting. I have a bit of a different take on that.
Okay.
I think more of that is the mind that gets us into trouble, making decisions from the mind. I feel like your body knows what is right for it. The subconscious is not quite the same as the body. I do think we have subconscious behaviors and triggers, but I think that those are actually run by the mind, not the body. I feel like if we can be patient and get out of our head, get into meditation, get into our body, fully grounded in our body will tell us what is correct for us and the decision we should make just based on ooh or right? It's an intuitive function. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it does. I can definitely see that. Like, I can understand that so much.
But you're not wrong about subconscious programming, right? But I think our subconscious drives us when we are running other people's programs, which are put into us immediately at birth. We start being programmed by other people, and their programs are back. So we have to do the deconditioning work. We have to get present, get back into our body, and remove the stuck energy and all the stuff that we have, these funky belief sets that we've taken on, just becoming aware over time. And then we're able to hear the body. We're able to really hear it. When you're stuck in your conditioning and when you're very traumatized as well, I think it's very hard to be connected to the body because we're not grounded. We're trying to escape the body because it feels like an unsafe place. Hence going into the mind.
And we're used to having something to either blame or use as an excuse when we live, when we're not grounded. Like, we always can say, well, I did that because, or it's because I'm this way.
Or this happened to me, or this person.
This happened.
And
like, we get so used to it.
Yeah, you don't want to bypass one's experience. And yet you also don't want to dwell in a past experience that really only has the bearing on the present that we give it. Right. Yeah. And it's a fine line. It's like, I always say the story deserves the light of day. The what happened, the who, what, when, where, why. That's the mental interpretation, understanding of like what's going on here. And the thing about the story, there's going to be some truth to it. There's also going to be a lot of nonsense in it because that's just the nature of the mind. So much, right? So you give the story the light of day and then you put it on the shelf. I'll take you down later. But for right now, we're just going to put you right there. And then you connect with the body. And when you connect with the body, you go, okay, where do I physically feel this in my body? Boom, you're grounded. But you have to get rid of the mind, kind of turn off the mind. And for me, that visual, just like, I'm just going to put it aside right now. And I always give myself permission to take it back down because the story is seductive and we don't want to give it up, right? It's like, yeah, but this, yeah, it's true. Sure. Put it on the shelf. And then you get into the body. And then that's how I think we can access the emotions and really do deep healing work, is once we get into the body. If we keep it in the mind, we're really disconnected from our body and our emotions. And then once you get through that and you feel those feelings in your body, suddenly you can feel your body's yes and no really clearly. And it becomes easy to make the right decisions in life without getting all up in your head and overthinking it and making a pros and cons list. Like, it's really simple. We are intuitive beings. We know, we just know, and we don't have to have the explanation and the justification. We just think we do.
See, I like that you say that, because I was having a conversation with somebody one day, and they kept talking about their mental illness, and they blamed a lot on their mental illness. And I was trying to explain to them, I was like, you are not your mental illness.
Right.
You're not. And I was like, there was a time in your life where you didn't have that. You just didn't have that. Like when you were a child, did you have this? And they'll be like, no. And it's like, then when did you become this?
Mm-hmm.
And, it lets you think that there was a time in your life where this didn't bother you. This wasn't a part of who you were, because you remember being happy. You remember the times where you didn't feel this way. And you can't let your mental illness be the crutch of why you do things that are not okay.
Yeah. So a lot of time, excuse me.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, it's identification with the story, it's creating an identity out of something. I have a student who is amazing at taking her diagnoses and using it as a container to really understand and dig through her own neuroses. Right. She's has recently, and she's in her early 60s, and she was recently diagnosed with ADHD and autism. And so she's lived her whole life, and she's very committed to her work and her healing. And she's done this with her physical diagnoses as well. She's really a master at it. What she does is, once she has a diagnosis, right? When she understands, she has the container. Now she has structure to work within. And then she can go through and she can navigate through it, and she can come out the other side even more grounded and open to spirit and helping others than she was before, even though she has all the same symptoms she's dealing with. But she uses it as a container. Most of the time, it's really easy to use our diagnoses as an identity, to identify with it. Oh, I am autistic. You have a brain that works differently. It's the label is autism. That's a container. How do you work within that container? And but most people, I think, are encouraged to create an identity out of it. And once you create an identity out of it, now you've closed yourself off to everything else. It's like you were saying about the choices, right? Once you make a choice, you've closed off a certain subset. So I do not have a mental health diagnosis or any really diagnoses that I have dealt with. So that is not something that I can really speak to with any authority, but I can tell you that from working with other people and the students who I've worked with, the ones who have that and have used that as a container, it's incredibly powerful, like scalpel, like a tool to really understand yourself and then come through and bring your light out. But it's very easy to flip that on its head and bring yourself down and lock yourself down by identifying as a whole with that diagnosis. What do you think? Because this is definitely something that an area you have had to navigate.
I think once you make it an identity, there are certain rules you have to follow. Mm-hmm. And that comes with anything, though. Like if you say you're an addict, you're going to do addict things, because you are more likely to do what the mind says, in your mind says what an addict is to you. And once you have those rules to follow, then you'll follow those rules just to be able to keep the identity. And I like that she uses it as a container, because that lets you know that in the realm of things, this is a part of me, but it's not my identity. Yeah. And that's it's a big difference than, your identity over the container, because you just huge. Like I said, once you say you're this thing and it's your identity, then you have to follow the rules of that identity. And I feel like
Yeah.
that closes off a lot more
A
choices.
lot.
It closes off all the choices for you to get better.
Yeah, it does.
Because you made it your identity.
Once it's your ego identity, your ego doesn't want to let go of it.
No. And it's going to try to push you more and more.
Deeper and
it'll
deeper
push you
into
more
it.
and more.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you just get put into a snowball effect. And that's another thing I've come up with is that everything snowballs, no matter what you do.
Yep.
Like if you're doing positive things, it's going to snowball into more positive things.
Yeah.
And if you're doing negative things, it's going to snowball into more negative things. So you have to control which way your snowball is going.
Yes.
Because it can be anything. Like we literally can make and do anything on this planet.
Yeah.
And so because of that reason, we control where our snow goes.
Yes.
I plan on making
it's best to get ahead of that before it gains too much momentum. It's a little hard to correct course. It can be done though. It can be done. No matter how far down, the rabbit hole you've gone, you can always make a new choice and start going in a new direction. And, going back to the identification, people don't just do that with like their mental health but they do it with their traumas. They do it with, their political affiliations. They do it with their religion, their spiritual. I mean, humans are just, we love to create an identity because it feels safe, it feels secure. It feels like, okay, that's a structure I can work within. And it takes practice and courage to let go of all of our identities.
Yeah. And it's the fact that we want rules in our life. And
rules feel safe because we're fear-based creatures.
Yeah. And because of that, so we make rules for everything. And I was bad for that. Like my life was structured to hell. And like I was always a very strict person, even as a child. Like I got to focus on a point and I would literally follow it to the end.
Yeah.
Like, and that's just how I was. But, people always called me strict and people always said, they were like, you're just intense. And I was like, yeah. And I was very, especially younger, I was very intense. I was like, I definitely am. And I can't change that. And I was like, but I said that and then I couldn't change it. It's not until we put those words into action that, we said out loud that we're more likely to follow what we said.
Yeah.
And that's another thing about being human is we focus. And once we focus on something, we try to follow it to the end. And
there's power in that. The power of our focus is incredible. And it's also incredibly destructive. And like you say, kind of going back to that snowball, like what are you putting your focus and your attention on? That's going to make or break your life.
Yep. And I feel like a lot of the times, especially in the past, I let myself focus on the wrong things. And some of the situations.
Well, I'll do, right?
Yeah. And it took me out of situations that could have been good for me because I was so focused on the negative aspect of it.
Yep.
That I couldn't see anything else.
Yeah.
And like it is something you have to work towards doing better at. And it's not going to come instant, like especially if you've had years upon years of it, that snowball has gotten so big, it's hard to move it.
There's a lot of momentum.
Yeah, there's a lot of momentum. And it's hard to slow that down to see where you're headed.
Yeah.
But, learning that we have the choices to make and we can focus it in so many different directions.
Developing patience with yourself too. We tend to want to be like, well, if I make a different choice, I want to see all the results all better right now.
Yeah.
It's a journey, like make the choice and enjoy the little tiny shifts along the way. And then pretty soon, Spirit always says to me, it'll take longer than you want it to, but it'll happen faster than you think it will.
And you won't know that there's a change until the change has already been made.
Right. And then you'll be like,
a lot of the times,
wow. Yeah. Look at me.
When did I get here?
I'm doing so good.
Okay. I was just doing that the other day. I was just like, those things I wanted, I got.
Yeah.
Like, and I was making a list of, real things. I was like, I want a keyboard like that I want to play. And now I have two. And I was like, I want to get a laptop. Now I got two. And it's just
like, so great. Oh my God.
Yeah. I'm just like, when did that happen? And just seeing the fruits of my labor, I was like, I worked hard for that. And I didn't even realize I had gotten it.
Yeah.
And
because we get it when we don't have such a strong desire for it, when we don't really care that much, then it just like shows up in spades, which is sort of unfair, but like, that's just the way it is.
See, I've I've learned that I can't put too much thought into something if I want it to go right.
Correct. Oh, so wise. Yeah, that's so true. Because again, you're getting in the head and you're messing up your mojo by overthinking, right?
Yeah. And like I overthink so much, or I used to, like that it would stop me from getting the things I want because I would be focused on it for so long. And that shows you how time works. Because you're focused on it, time goes far slower because you're like, I want it now, I want it now, I want it now. And it feels like everything is just dragging for you to get to that point. And I know when I started my business, like, you know, because I haven't had any clients yet, but I am doing all the stuff that I need to do first in order to have clients. So it's like I'm going to school, I'm getting certifications, I'm doing all the things necessary for, you know, like at least most Americans that you need to have credentials and all that stuff. But, you know, I want clients now, I want to help people now. And it's like, it makes it feel like it's taking far longer because I'm focused on it. And when I draw, I can't, like, if I'm drawing, I can't put too much focus to what I want to draw. Like, I will be like, okay, I want to draw Batman. And as long as I'm thinking about drawing Batman, it's hard to do.
Yeah.
Like it'll become far more difficult for me to just sit there and draw Batman if I'm focused on it. But until I tell myself, I'm like, just draw.
Yeah.
And then I'll be like, huh, it took me an hour and a half to draw a nice picture of Batman. Great. When did that happen? And it's just, I've realized that was a part of my life on different areas. Like that's how I am about things. And like I tap dance. I do a lot of different types of dance, ballet, jazz, tap.
Do you? That's amazing.
Yeah. And like that's what I trained in. I was a trained musical theater major. So like I'll be outside on the porch, I'll be listening to music and I'll start tapping to it. And I can hear it, you know, through in my head from my feet. And so I'll know when I'm doing correct steps or when I can hear I'm going with the music. And then as soon as I focus on it, I'll mess up. And I had to realize
that's interesting.
That was a part of it.
Okay, so I'm not. I love that you said that because I just made me have a flash on something. I've never considered myself musical or particularly like, you know, that's just never been something that I felt like was my gift. But I used to dance, and I remember when I was real little, the dance teacher said, count the beats, and then you'll know, you know, just count the beats. And so I really tried to count the beats, and I kept screwing it up. Like I could not keep it straight. I couldn't keep the music straight, the dance move straight or anything. When I let go of counting the beats and just felt it in my body, I just knew what move to do at what point in the music and I could feel the beat. And then I had that experience earlier too, as I've been working with a musician to turn some of my poems into songs. And so I'm learning more about music and, you know, kind of, and I've realized that like you, if I'm thinking about it, okay, 1, 2, I can't do it. I cannot, it'll totally mess me up. Most people, they're okay, that's logical. For me, it's got no logic to it. If I just get out of my head and just start moving, I'm always on beat. I'm always on it, you know? So that's really, that's a very
flow state.
Yeah, it's a very intuitive way of doing it. And so I think that's valuable for people to hear is like, if you think you're bad at something, you probably just like need to get out of your head.
Yeah. I mean, because it'll be us telling yourself, you know, because a lot of the things we're so focused on doing is we're focused on it so much.
Yes.
So we don't want to mess it up.
Yeah. We get all rigid about it.
We want to get it good. And that's how we are, especially Americans. Like when we're told to do something, we want to do it right. So we focus on it because we think we have to. And once we focus on it, that's when people mess up and they don't understand it. They were like, but I was focused so hard on it. I was like, that's the problem. You were so focused on it that you were paying so much attention that you were thinking too hard about it. That's why you messed up. Like, you're like, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Dang it.
Right. That's
like,
exactly.
And I've noticed I do that with playing percussion instruments too. Like, as long as I'm not thinking about it, I can stay in the beats. I can do all the stuff that you want to do from it. And you can't do that once you think about it. As soon as you're like, I'm playing the drum, that's when you'll mess up. And it's like, I don't know why people are like that we're not supposed to focus like they teach us to focus. because they want you to be in flow state.
Some people can do that. Some people can do that. And I think that, I mean, there's just some of us that are just more like intuitively driven, I think. It comes from sideways from a different place.
We feel instead of having
feeling,
to put,
yes.
It's feeling compared to using your mind to do.
I mean, if I had to follow a format for poetry, I think I would vomit. It's absolutely not. It is going to come out how it comes out.
And having, once again, people tell us their rules, puts us in boxes, and those boxes aren't for everybody. Like that's for a very small population of people that, can follow the rules of everything. Like most people are not going to be able to follow one person's rules. Like that's why there's so many of us to have so many different experiences. That way we can help a plethora of people, because there's someone out there that's probably had your same experience, but not like you did. So you can find someone who may have your same, thing in this section of their life, but they're completely different in another aspect of your life. But you can follow their words on this piece and just this piece. And that's why we find multiple teachers in life to teach us about the world, because there's so many of us. And this is a theory of mine too, that as a whole, as humanity as a whole, that we're a multiverse. And I don't mean like one person is millions of themselves and they do everything that's possible through thought. That's why there's so many of us. We are, as a group, are the multiverse. And someone else out there is gonna do those experiences that you chose not to do. And so like I might have chose to go this way. Somebody else is going to choose to go this way. And we can see the way they went and what happened when they went that way, when you can look at it and be like, well, I didn't choose that way. And it took me entirely, somewhere entirely different. So you literally have a multiverse. And, people don't have to think outside of the box when they think about it, because people want to argue with you about what multiverse theory is, because they're so, listening to the rules of science. They have to take it a certain way. And they can't see that, yes, there's a multiverse. It's called the human race. We all will have different experiences. So we can test all the theories because there's so many of us.
Oh my God, that is brilliant. Okay, so I got to share with you. That expands on sort of the download I got about like the multiverse, right? So I had this vision one time of a multifaceted crystal, right? And it was like, and the message I got was, we are here, humans, having every possible permutation of every experience. And the way that I understood it was, you and I are having this conversation, and in this drop of time, and I don't see it as timelines. I see it as like droplets is how it's shown to me. This drop of time, it's going a certain way. We're using certain tones and phrases, and it's giving us this particular experience. In another drop of time, it's going at the same time, it's going slightly differently. So we're using slightly different language, slightly different tone, and then giving us a slightly different experience. And that just goes out to infinity almost, right? Where we're having every possible permutation, so that in the end, I am you and you are me. Right. We are all having the same, we are one, right? It takes you back to oneness. But it's interesting that I feel like you took that same understanding, like we kind of had the same download, like, okay, that like we're all having all the experiences. And then you brought it into the physical world by the people on the planet are facilitating every possible permutation of every experience, because we come up with the same sort of situation and we make different decisions. And then we come back and we connect and we communicate and we share and we understand creation. We understand all of that.
And because there'll be so many people, there'll be so many people after we die. That we'll never know, we'll never see. But we've had our experiences, and they can always look back on our experiences through books, through the internet, through so many different things now.
Which is why sharing our experience is so important for the evolution of consciousness, for the evolution of the planet. Amazing.
How far we can move as humans is like, because we know somebody that's had these experiences, and we don't know how many more people are going to be ever. So that's a lot more experiences that we'll never know. And that's why the picture can never be finished.
And And it takes us all the way back to the beginning of the conversation it's about the individual. It's about the individual experience, not the collective experience. The individual experience creates the collective experience, not the other way around.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. My kind of conversations.
Yeah, mine too. Like I get, like I said, since I've been doing the podcast, I've gotten a lot more of these conversations.
Yes.
And I've been able to share them with my family. So now they get a part of me that they usually wouldn't get because I'm so structured about my life with family. Like I'm a certain way in my family, and that's just how I am. And so they don't get to see the side of me that opens up to spirituality most of the times,
right?
Or just the human experience. And even my dad told me today, actually, he was just like, "I like what you're doing with the podcast. I really like what you're doing." He was like,
I love it.
He was like, "I'm understanding you a lot more." And I was like, "That's the point."
And
like, that was
maybe
why.
Also seeing that there are others who think like you and believe like you and feel like you and connect with you. Right. So like humanizing you in our family dynamics, I feel like, we get pigeonholed. We pigeonhole family members and family members pigeonhole us. It's just the nature of it. So how valuable and perfect that your family members are willing to watch your podcast, listen to you speak and share, listen to other people share, get to know you better and expand their understanding of you. So it's effectively taking you out of that box that they have inadvertently put you in because that's what family does. That's really great.
Yeah, I'm glad they're enjoying it. Like they seem to. And it might show them a person that they connect with that they can, maybe get help from or learn something that can help with their everyday life. And that was another reason I started the podcast. I wanted to be a knowledge broker.
Oh, I love it.
Like I wanted people to be able to get the knowledge they can use in everyday life. And because it's hard. Life is hard. And
life is hard.
Being alive is hard. So to get as much knowledge out there as possible for everyone, it gives everyone an equal chance to have a better life. And I think as humans, somewhere down the line, lost something in us that, well, we got told rules, and that was the thing. We're still following rules from 2,000 years ago. Like life has changed so much. Like just the structure of things. Like the church and government have the same type of rule in class. Like we don't see it that way, but you have a figurehead. You have a bunch of people under them that do a certain job, and it goes down until it gets to the individual who has no power in the situation and just has to follow the rules. And, once religion took the same aspect as government, it really changed how people thought. And over time, we've been passing those rules on to every generation after us, which helped build generational curses. Like we follow these rules and it puts us in a place to not be able to deal with it. And we're starting to see that nowadays. And we're seeing where the fruits of those labors took us. We're seeing where the snowball ended up. And we're now wanting to change where the snowball is going.
Yeah.
And that's an amazing thing to see in this life, because I know growing up, it was far more easy for a parent to beat their children instead of talking to them and seeing why they do something and find out other ways to handle a situation than just attacking your child. Like it was a big, that was a big thing. They used to whoop our ass. And like, I don't do that with my children because I see a better way of doing things.
Yeah.
And we're finding out that so much that we learned was wrong.
Yeah.
Like, even especially with school, like, we learned that Christopher Columbus did these things, and we're just finding out that no, he actually didn't do these things because there was people who did it before him. And it's like, what?
Yeah.
It's like, but you told me for years that was the right answer. If I'd have picked a different answer in school, I would have failed.
Right.
And it's like now it's like, oh yeah, our bad. And it's like, you're bad.
Oopsie.
Come on.
Come on, man.
Like this, you just messed up my whole life. I'm trying to explain to my kid who Christopher Columbus is. But they did the best they could. when
Yeah, and
with the knowledge they
I saw
had.
this amazing quote. I think it was on Instagram. I don't know who said it, but it was one of those like, just because your mother didn't break all the generational curses doesn't mean she didn't break any. And I thought that was really
True.
profound because
Yeah.
we're all like every generation is doing a little bit more, a little bit more. And our kids are going to have a really different life experience than we did, and our grandchildren even better, our great grandchildren even better. And it started with you, and it started with me making these little adjustments where we could, because it's unlikely we're going to change all of it and do everything perfectly, but we are going to do some things better and make those changes, those incremental changes. It's powerful.
That is true. Well, I'm going to let you go because I have held you over time.
Again, we've been having a great. Hey, I want to give your listeners my grounding meditation, since we've been talking about that quite a bit. It feels really apropos.
Yes, please.
You can just go to my website, ingridhturner.com, and then I'll send you the direct link after this so that you can include it in the show notes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I wish I would have asked more of the questions because I had so many more questions to ask you.
Well, we'll have to do a round two.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. Please come back to the show when you have time. I know you're busy. I do have to ask, I was going to just ask you, how can my listeners get in touch with you? So any links you want to say right now, that would be great.
My direct link to, if you want to learn about me, it's ingridhturner.com. Don't forget the H in the middle. The Bhava Spiritual Mission, our website is bhavamission.org, BHAVA mission, as in I'm on a mission.org. And then I'm all over social media, Ingrid H. Turner on just about every platform.
Awesome. Okay. This is her book. I won't be showing this in most of my videos because I send the actual videos of my videos, or the videos of my videos. The videos I put on my website, and I put a podcast version on YouTube.
Yeah, it's called Bitch, a Reclamation. It's poetry for women. It's, really quickly, can I just tell you like what inspired that book?
Yes, that was one of my questions, actually.
It's poetry from, and I put this in the introduction, like it's about the woman's experience, but really it's about a white millennial woman's experience, because that's the experience that I have, right? So, and one of these days I want to do an anthology called, I don't want to call it Bitch, a Reclamation, and I want to have women's experiences, all different walks of life, from from all over, instead of just my narrow experience. But my experience is what I got, the woman's experience. And so what inspired this was I was traveling in New Mexico, and I went to the grocery store, and it had this parking lot that was freaking weird. And I went down the wrong way. Some they have the arrows up and down one way, and I went down the wrong way, and there's a guy coming up the other way. And so I like scooched over. I was like, oops. And I kind of mouthed sorry to him, and he leans his head out the window and he goes, "You fucking bitch." I was like, whoa, and I was like, that was a lot. It was a ton of energy thrown at me, and it felt so unfair. Like, who hasn't driven down the wrong way in a parking lot? Why would you say that to me? It's obviously like not a me issue, but it rattled me to the core for some reason. And so I went back to where I was staying, just still all rattled. And then I started thinking about it. And then I wrote the poem, the bitch poem, in the book. And when I wrote that poem, it cleared out all that energy. And that's what led to the compilation, is talking about the women's experience and reclaiming our personal power, reclaiming the word bitch. Sure, call me a bitch. It's mine now. That no longer gets to be an insult.
I have to piggyback off that. So maybe it's going to take a little longer than I thought. But I named the podcast, What Are You Even Talking About? Because when I would have an argument with somebody, it was multiple people, and I was right in the situation, the first thing they would say is, "What are you even talking about?"
Oh my God.
And I'd be like, you know what I'm talking about.
Reclamation.
And so I was like, I had to be I have to name my podcast that, because
that's brilliant.
Now you can ask all these other people what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And they're going to validate the things I said in those situations. And I knew I was right then. And they tried to, make me think I was crazy or that I didn't know what I was talking about. So I named the podcast, What Are You Even Talking About?
That's so great. That's empowering though. That's it. It's like, you know what? Snatch your power back. Don't give your power away to anybody who has a condescending or a mean remark to you, no, to hell with you. That's mine now. Fight me.
Yep, exactly. I'm a big boy. They don't want to do that fight. But I even made shirts with it that say it.
That's great. What are you even talking about? Amazing. Awesome.
And a lot of people hear that when, they're trying to tell somebody, or focus on their boundaries and tell them like, look, you can't treat me this way. Like the first thing somebody will say is, what are you even talking about? They're like, you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this problem right here.
You know exactly what I'm talking about. That's such a that's such a dismissive and condescending thing to say. It's like, you're just crazy. Like,
yep. And that's the second thing they say after that. You're crazy.
And you're like, true. And
like, I'm still right though. I can be crazy
still
and right.
Yep.
And that's another thing people do to people when they have a mental illness.
Oh
they
God,
treat them like they don't know what they're talking about, or they'll try to use the fact. I mean, that's with anything though. If you've been an addict, if you have a mental illness, like they will try to use those things to keep you down when they're in the wrong.
Toxic people will weaponize anything and your history, your trauma, your experiences. But you know what? The right people will never do that. And the more that we show up authentically and sharing our experience, we become a beacon for the right people, for our tribe, for our community, for people who want to hold us up and help us be better and hold our feet to the fire sometimes, But you also, there's a fair amount of wading through BS and nonsense and toxicity as those people make their way to you. And that's just the human experience. And we get better and better at discerning that and just batting aside the nonsense to make room for the real connections that are ultimately so supportive.
Okay, so I got one last question, and that is, what is the next question, or what would you ask the next guest?
Because I've literally been feeling this pressure since the beginning. I'm like, what will my question be? Okay, here's the question. What is the real measure of success? We'll go with that.
That's a good one.
All right.
I can't wait to see what my next guest says.
I am.
Because if I'm right, it's going to be very interesting, because unless I get some more guests for this month, this will be the last one for the month until I get some more. But the next guest I have booked is one of my favorite YouTubers, and who I watch religiously. I watch him every day, and it's about comic books. Like,
yes. Oh my God.
Like, if you can see on my wall, that's all of my wall is comic books. And he is a comic book YouTuber. And so that'll be fun to ask him.
That'll be really, really interesting.
Well, he got big really quickly, like on his channel, and he's got 100,000 subscribers or something like that, or more. So that'll be a good question for him if he's the one that gets the question.
If he's the one that gets the question,
we'll see if he's the next one, or because, like I said, this might be the last one for the month. But thank you for being on the show. Thank
you for having me.
It's been wonderful talking to you. We're going to have to do this again. You have to definitely be back on the show again.
I'll come back. Tell me when. We'll send me the link. Cool. We'll do it. All right. Beautiful. Thank you so much. I said,
and we'll talk definitely on Facebook, because we're friends on there. Like, so, this goes further than the podcast. I don't just interview people and then never talk to them again. Like, I try to keep in touch with people.
Cool.
And, build my tribe up. And that's what I feel like this is. I feel like we are definitely the same tribe.
Perfection.
I like to end my podcast with saying, thank you for today. Thank you for yesterday. Thank you for tomorrow. Always remember to question your reality. And at every end, there's a beginning. You guys take care. Thank you, Ingrid, for being on the show.
Thank you, Mark.
And you have a good day.
You too. Thank you.
So that's the end of today's show. I want to thank my guests for bringing us some much needed knowledge. It was greatly appreciated and valued. And I want to thank you, the listener, for letting me bring you some knowledge you maybe didn't have, and hope you can apply it to your everyday life. Please remember to like, share, comment, because I love hearing what you guys think, and every like helps out the channel. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps me help bring better quality videos to you. Thank you for letting me be a part of your day or night. You guys are amazing. Thank you for today. Thank you for yesterday. Thank you for tomorrow. Always remember to question your reality, and at every end, there is a beginning. Thank you for tuning in to What Are You Even Talking About? I'm your host, M. Lyons, the Nomothete, and take care till next time.